The title is Investing in Education, the Human Capital Approach. I was just saying that this is going to be a very uncontroversial discussion compared to the previous one, but Jawad Khaki reminded me that anything he says will be controversial. So we will have a good discussion today about an issue... Provocative. An issue that concerns everyone. I don't think anyone doesn't have a view about the importance of education, whether you're left-wing, right-wing, conservative, Labour, African, European, American, Muslim, non-Muslim, young, old. Education is about the future of all of us, adults, children, our grandkids. What do we do about it as a community? What do we do about it as business leaders? What do we do about it as stakeholders? How do we build successful education systems? And what can we do as philanthropists? We have an amazing panel of very qualified people reading their bios on the way here, very, very impressive, all involved in this field in some shape or another. In no particular order, Sajjad Ibrahim is to my right, built the Canadian plastics company Parpack, from a small business into a major player with $200 million of revenue. His philanthropic ventures are just as notable. I believe he's made some amazing donations to a health foundation in Ontario, among many others. Arif Asari has combined a successful business in North America and Costa Rica, what a great place, with a lifetime of volunteering. He was one of the masterminds behind the worldwide appeal that raised $22 million for the Jaffrey Centre in Toronto. And if you haven't been to that centre and you get a chance, please do, it's amazing. Jawad Khaki is to my left, former Vice President of Microsoft, co-founder with his wife of the Khaki Foundation, which funds projects on 4 different continents to help the most vulnerable members of society. Obviously, education projects at the heart of a lot of that. Mujtaba Datu at the end there. 30 years of experience providing actuarial services for insurance and risk management. I believe he spent 10,000 hours in the last decade preparing actuarial reports. You're a Malcolm Gladwell bona fide expert. With 10,000 hours under your belt, an expert on a lot of this stuff. Then we have Azra Khalfan, who has been managing her family's businesses for 20 years, has been recognized by many as a role model for female entrepreneurs, has been featured alongside the likes of Hillary Clinton, Ariana Huffington and others. And Mustafa Qasim, co-founder of Midas Safety, world's #1 private supplier of safety gloves. He focuses a great deal on what we were talking about earlier, social responsibility, brings hands-on support to education and healthcare projects, especially on the subcontinent. Give your panel a round of applause, please. I just want to begin by asking each of you, just to kind of set the scene, in the sense of when people talk about investing in education, it's a very technical term, very business, typically business phrase, to build human capital. What does that mean to each of you? Not just in theory, but in your own everyday lives and experiences.
I'm going to share with you a number that will astound you. How much does it take to educate a child, be it in India, South Africa, Australia? Somewhere in the range of $30,000 to $50,000 a year, maybe for a degree. But take that educated young person. Over the next 30 to 40 years, that young woman is going to earn over $2 million in the earnings, at a minimum. You have created a millionaire with your small $50,000 education fund. And when that person contributes, earns over $1 million over their lifetime, they will have something to give to philanthropy, because they will invest in another $50,000 in another student. What you have done is created philanthropists by just educating one young person.
First of all, I'm very honored and humbled to be here, and humbled because 2 of my teachers are sitting in the panel, and I'm a student, both of Brother Sajjad Ibrahim and Jawad Khaki. So whatever I say is actually them that have taught me. So the numbers for you here, just go through them. Canada, and then I'll explain the numbers. 2310, 2,310. United States, 2292. The UK, 2125. France, 2120. Costa Rica, 1127. India, 201. Pakistan 153, Kenya 136, Tanzania 124, Yemen 100, Madagascar 30, Uganda 21. These are the dollars spent on a GDP per capita basis by these respective countries for education. Now we can see there's a direct correlation between education and GDP per capita. Obviously, in this case, the countries that spend the most amount of money per capita on education are most likely to have a greater per capita on the GDP side. So investing in education is beneficial for society as a whole, and obviously for our community as well.
I think education is the only way one can get people out of poverty. One can get people to live a healthier life. One can get people to live a better life, a life of dignity, and a life of in the end, after going through the whole process, they then are able to then give as well and become role models for society.
We often hear this line, it's a way of getting people out of poverty. In your own experience, how much evidence is there that education is a ladder out of poverty? Because of course there's so many other factors that put someone in poverty, with their family, their work experience, their parent situation. How much has education, in your experience, helped break that cycle of poverty, an actual real world case study?
We haven't, we've been sort of working on that now more than before, and we're trying to sort of hire an alumni director in each of the educational institutions that we are supporting, and trying to now find out as to how exactly have they come out of it. Like in one of the schools in Karachi where we have 3,900 students, we have for the last 4 or 5 years look at where they are studying, and I have with me about 150 of those students have done extremely well and have gone out and done good work. But we don't have the before and after comparison, but looking at the society where we are operating, we can really see the difference in terms of what is happening. But I think we are going to start documenting that to see how that can be moved forward.
Okay, sure. So when I look at education, I like to actually look at it in a holistic way. It's just not looking at education to create cookie cutter workers for the post-industrialized society. Right? And there are really 3 things that I think we need to focus on as a community. First and foremost, of course, is to educate people, primary, secondary, vocational training, professional training, so that they can end up having a dignified, honest living. That's the objective, number 1, right? How do we go about that? And I think we can elaborate as we go into the conversation. The second thing is really developing institutions of learning in our Muslim communities, or at least Muslim-based communities, so that we actually will nurture the next generation of moral and ethical leaders for the globalized world. Right now, we have a crisis. And the crisis we have, which is the third part, is a clash of ignorance, whether it's the pastor in Florida burning the Quran, or the mob in Karachi burning the city. Right? We have a clash of ignorance. We need to actually have ways in investing in continuing education, not only people coming up, but also people who already developed, to retrain them, so that they have a dialogue between civilizations. 3 things, right? Honest living, moral ethical leadership, and dialogue.
It's much broader than just ticking some boxes or getting some certificates.
Exactly.
Azra.
Sure. In my experience, I would say that we have gone 3 ways into doing this. One was with the Citizen Foundation, who would build schools in the slum area. When I started with them, they had 35 schools. Today, they have 1,300 schools. And they are now professionally run. The only thing what we do is that we provide them with money. The second area was with the middle class education, which was Al-Murtaza School. And Al-Murtaza School has now reached a level which is equivalent to the best school in Karachi. As far as the students who have achieved and who are today in good positions in this thing, we have a detailed list of it, which we can provide. Then in Lucknow, where we are working with TMT, Unity School, where we have about 2,000 students in the daytime, and over there, it starts with the primary education till the secondary, And the primary education, we sort of look at the students and counsel them right from the beginning till they reach the secondary school. And even at the secondary school, we counsel them and we make sure that the girls and the boys go to the good colleges. The colleges there are not, it's only very recently that we have found that they are getting into IIT areas. Before, what they were going was at a very low school.
That's right.
Basically I'm coming from a very different angle. I'm not like everyone else here, mashallah, a philanthropist. I'm actually on the receiving end. And what he just said basically is exactly what kind of happened to me. And the ripple effects are just, subhanAllah, beautiful. You started out with a holistic approach, and the only two things that I found that I received that you didn't mention is mentoring and funding. So basically, the education on a higher level. I was just talking to Upper Uncle, and I remember I was kind of like pulled into the leadership development program that was offered by Nisimco at a subsidized, and I went there and I was so shy and so hesitant. Things started rolling. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. One thing led to another. I've received 2 scholarships, one from Wells Fargo and another one from the Tory Burch Foundation and the Goldman Sachs Foundation. And I received the mentoring, and what else? As I said, the funding as well. And so I can see the ripple effects, and I can see how this type of approach can make a huge impact. And especially, of course, on the receiving end, when it's coming to our community members, we're able to pay it forward.
Here's a question to all of you who are philanthropists on the stage, in education in particular. What is the goal, just to pick up on something Joanne mentioned, what is your actual goal? Is it volume? Is it to try and educate as many poor people, poor kids who don't have access to education? Or is it actually to try and find the next high achiever, the next Stephen Hawking, the next Bill Gates, the next Barack Obama? What is the actual goal here when it comes to when you're considering a project to invest? Please.
Like, we have an academic director who's sort of written a paper on who's an educated person. And that's not just, and we are sort of now debating amongst ourselves, because there is the board exams in Pakistan and in India, that do you teach the children to pass the board exams, or do you really educate them with critical thinking and all these other areas?
What's the answer?
The answer is we've got to do both. And like, if you look at the school that we run in Karachi, we've got a student-teacher ratio of 1:13, which is unheard of even in a private school. So obviously quality of education is extremely important, but not only that.
But that has budgetary implications, obviously. You're spending more.
Yes, we are spending a lot of money.
So somebody could say to you, well, you could get more kids into that classroom who can't study if you change the ratio.
I mean, that could be an argument, but I think if we made a conscious effort that quality education is going to be number one, that priority for us.
So does everyone else agree with that?
Let me kind of look at it.
If I may.
Oh, you go on now, and then we'll come to you.
Yeah. So we just heard from the organizing chairman. He dropped out of university, and he's a high achiever. On my table, there was another gentleman that I've known for a long time, Munir Parwani. He also dropped out of university. He's a high achiever. And so I think education as a way to eradicate poverty with these numbers makes sense. So I'm not saying volume, quantity over quality. We certainly have to measure quality, but we should be concerned as a community to figure out where the poverty exists, and then I think the first medicine of poverty is to inject education into that system.
Basic education, reading, writing, getting...
Absolutely. And I'm talking secular education, not religious education.
Sure. Now, you see, when I think about my goal would be to make sure that when you look at basic necessities like food, shelter, water, or air things, I think that we can all agree that the
access to quality education should be a fundamental human right. Now the problem is that we actually have experience working with TCF, also working in India. And I'll tell you what some of the problems we have working with the traditional was. Number one, the brick and mortar cannot reach everybody in time. Right? So we know that this is not going to work. Even when there's brick and mortar school, we know from statistics in India and in Pakistan, the number of girls that go is 1/3 the number of boys. They don't have access. And number three, we had a discussion with the President of Tanzania and the Minister of Tanzania when he came to Washington, D.C. in 2008, and they're spending a lot of GDP numbers that Arif has talked about. But here's the issue. The output of teacher training colleges cannot possibly meet the demand of secondary and primary schools in Tanzania. So the choice is there's a whole generation of children will become, instead of assets, liabilities to the nation, right? And then, think about refugee camps. Today, maybe you probably know more about this than I do. 25 to 50 million refugees, and primarily Muslims, right? In this regard, I would say Muslims are uniquely placed to solve this problem, right? The woman in the refugee camp, or the divorced or the widowed woman in Tanzania, or other parts of the world, the priority would be to put food and shelter, and not really get the child educated. So the issue is really, we have to rethink the method of delivery.
I get that. All I'm saying is, I get that in the abstract. I'm wondering if you guys sit down and take up your checkbook and are deciding, we want to spend money on a school. When you're making that decision, are you saying, you know what, it would be great for us as a Khoja community or a Muslim community or a Canadian community to have, I don't know, a center of excellence to produce the next round of top Indian engineers we want to support? Or are you saying, actually, we just need to make sure everyone can read and write?
I said this earlier, it's access to quality, right? And it's a fundamental human right to everybody. Now, where they go after the primary, secondary education, they may pursue vocational training, they may go professional.
You see your obligation as making sure they get the basics.
Basics, and then they can make their own future.
Okay, well let me ask all of you, we talked a lot about the developing world since this began, but you actually mentioned, both of you mentioned statistics about the West as well. Pretty expensive to get an education in the West, especially in an age of austerity. A question to those of you, a lot of you are based, I think the majority of you are based in the West, is that fair to say? Coming to my last panel,
Dubai.
Okay, so a lot of you are based in the West. So I just want to ask one question. For those of you who are in Khoja communities in the West, and you're looking at, you want to spend a lot of money in poorer countries, obviously. The need is greatest, India, Pakistan, Africa. But do you worry sometimes that maybe you're taking the eye off the ball at home? What's happening to communities at home? What's happening to the next generation of kids in our communities? Underprivileged Muslim kids, but also white working class kids, black kids, kids who are being left behind by education systems that are underfunded, poorly run, overcrowded. How do you balance the obligations between the obviously in the developing world and what we talked about in the earlier panel about inequality, the rise of populist politicians? What do we do at home?
I think in the Western world, especially Canada, United States, that there's nothing more that we can do as a community that the government doesn't do, the municipal government, or in our case, the provincial government.
Our taxes.
Our taxes. So our taxes, so it's incumbent upon us to be active in the political sphere in order to drive those issues to those people that are in charge, or become ourselves in charge of it. So we don't have any excuses for that. Unfortunately, as our previous discussion was, is that in the other countries that generally supposed to have public education, like Pakistan, and perhaps that would be a question you should have asked the Prime Minister, as to like the growth in GDP.
He's right.
The growth in the GDP did not come with any growth in education per capita spending.
Are you an economist? How do you know that?
But what I'm saying is that in the West, we're taken care of. And if we're not taken care of, it's our fault because we're not using the system.
Who agrees with our, who disagrees with us?
I disagree with you.
Oh. And you're his teacher. So.
And I agree with you.
Okay.
Basically, there is an opportunity, like in Canada and Toronto as well. There is a non-profit organization or a charitable organization that has this program called L2L, License to Learn, where they are going into schools in poor neighborhoods and where they are teaching the older students to become mentors for younger students. With that, I mean, we are funding part of that program.
But also, correct me if I'm wrong, aren't there opportunities, and I'm not saying this is a good thing or bad thing, I'm just throwing it out there, aren't there opportunities in places like the United States with charter schools, in the UK with free schools, for communities to actually set up their own schools? Is that something that any of you have considered or support doing?
No, I mean, basically there's a lot of things going in the United States. Okay, there's two things. Charter schools, right, is a way to actually make sure that parents have a say in where the tax money goes and education-wise. And there's also STEM schools, giving emphasis on science and engineering. I agree with Arif that basically in the Western societies, the things are taken care of by our taxes. But more than that, there is leadership capacity in the West for the problem to solve because of the educated masses, right? When you look at institutions like Tanzania, where I've been to, in the remote villages, where the woman is spending about 2 hours going to get a pail of water, right? Or the widow is taking care of 4 kids and earn a living. That's really where the actual problem is. And there's no taxation. So those children will end up becoming liability. Let me give an anecdotal example, right? In Bukoba, okay? And this is really an interesting thing. There's a Khoja kind of Khojaism went. He couldn't really go to a Khoja mosque for dinner. He needed more dinner than I needed it. But then he tells me, I'm going to go to Lahore. I said, where are you going to go to Lahore? Well, I'm going to go to madrasa. You see? So radicalization comes in from deprivation. I think there was the point made earlier. So there's a risk to the human society that not only a nation will lose a chance to become prosperous, but I think they'll become a liability to our global world. And we've seen this effects, of terrorism and recruitment.
And just sticking with the contrast East and West, I mean, Azra, when you talked about your experience and the support you got, the mentoring and the different ones, that was all in the West, or where was it?
Yes.
And do you think that was enough? Do you think there's enough support like that out there for other people who are following in your footsteps?
Well, the reason I disagree with him is with Arif, is because there is the resources are there, but if you can't afford them, and so if you're kind of like in the middle, you're kind of like hitting a wall. Especially when I was a business owner, I had to make sure that I basically put food on the table, and so these programs that I kind of like took advantage of were designed like master programs for people like myself, that like I wasn't qualified for free education and I just needed that type of support. And the thing is that the whole reason they're doing this is to kind of like create jobs and leaders, which is what he has touched on twice.
May I just respond to that? I wasn't sure that perhaps, maybe I misspoke. I said that in the West, the additional help that you got was facilitated by either your municipal, state, or federal government.
Well, that's correct,
right?
But there's different, and I agree with you.
Right?
Yes, I know
that's what I meant.
Yes,
what I meant as a community, that we don't and should probably not consider spending money on education on a primary, secondary level in the West, because we would rather go into the political sphere and enter those places where the decisions are made.
You just reminded me of one point briefly before I come to much, but very quickly, you mentioned primary, secondary. One thing we haven't talked about, no one, is the university level.
Yeah.
In North America, I've been living there for 2 years now, massive opportunities for people with wealth to invest in higher education, to sponsor chairs, pay for things. A lot of other religious communities have managed to do that. A lot of other ethnic groups have managed to do that and advance both educational agendas and political agendas by doing that. Do you think there's value, more should be done on that side of things, to invest in universities and chairs and departments?
Yeah, I think definitely there is an opportunity to do that, because you're earning your income in the West, you have to spend a certain amount of that in the West to give back to the community.
Provide some thought leadership.
You see,
yes, we've done, like, recently we sponsored a scholarship at Columbia Business School, where I studied from. So we think we need to give back to the community.
See, all these good things are good to do, right? The issue is one of prioritization.
Okay.
Right? Where do you prioritize? Do you prioritize making sure that everybody's food on the table?
Yeah.
Or do you
My
prioritize?
question earlier, but or can you walk and chew gum at the same time, as they said? Which
The earlier practice was in the West. When I survey the West, there is opportunity for anybody, be it a black single mom, be it an affluent Khoja student, to have access to education. What drives that decision is really their own initiative and the parental and communal support around it. So I don't think any student in the West who wants to get a further education through struggle, you may have to work part-time, but the opportunities and the facilities are there. In terms of should we invest in the universities, the thinkers, the think tanks, the policy makers, the influence makers really come from the think tanks who come from the academia primarily. By not investing in there, we are not confronting the issues that we are facing today in the political world. So that's critical, along with the tandem, to have a farm system to bring them up through the system.
Let me ask you all this. Is it unfair of me to say that when I read your bios, you're all doing very, very good work, very valuable work, but you're all doing it in your own spaces, in your own kind of silos, your own worlds, your own institutions.
You're not working together. Is there a reason why you all can't pool your resources and target it? Aren't you all business guys? Is that all about economies of scale?
So I mean, here is Mr. Hassan, Hussain Ali Bhai, Hamil Patel, we are pooled together and working in Gilgit-Baltistan. So we're working together in Karachi.
TCF is a good example, you know, 1,200 schools. Is the Khoja community who works in this field at the right place? Should we do more, less, about right, in terms of cooperation, working together? Because some people say to me, I'm not Khoja. Some people say to me, well no, we Khojas like doing things on our own. We want to do it by ourselves.
If I look at
our own
the amount of funds that I give out to charity, less than 5% goes to Khojas.
No, I didn't mean that, not for Khojas. I meant you like to work on your own. I'll set up a foundation in my family's name and I'll run it and I'll direct it, rather than I'll work with him, her, together in some kind of...
We are doing that in Pakistan.
So maybe the way we work is we actually don't run and operate schools. We give money out.
Yeah.
So for example, in India, you know, there's a local village organization. They had land, so go build the school, and we support them.
Yeah.
Who's we? Our foundation.
Okay.
So I mean, this is about giving money to the organizations that are doing the work. Tanzania, there's Bilal and there's WIPAS. We support Bilal and WIPAS, right? And then in Pakistan, TCF built 1,200 schools. How did it come about? He mentioned he's supporting schools. I think I know Sajjad is doing this stuff. So we don't want to duplicate what already exists. We want to add to stuff.
But wouldn't the best way to avoid duplication to be all, sorry to sound like an old communist in the second panel, have some kind of central coordination?
No, you see, here's the thing, and people actually, remember, bureaucracy will not really work. You know, the inspiration model will work. People will do whatever they think they will do. They will be responsible accounting. So we have to share best practices. We have to learn from each other, right? And we have to actually invite people to join in what they're doing. So for example, if Mustafa said, hey, I actually have a good model working in Lucknow to create vocational training, I will talk to him, figure out what we do, and how we do it in Bangalore. And how we get the same vocational trainers to go to Bukoba so that guy doesn't beg and go to madrasa in Lahore.
Is it working as Joel says? Is that the model?
Yes, that's the model.
And that's your experience?
Is it fair for me to say not to put all your eggs in one basket and diversify your funding so that every group is addressed?
Mehdi, a lot of it is also geocentric, right? So in our case, for example, you know, we're sort of Costa Rica based also, and I know that the Asari Family Foundation has made donations to the Sajjadiya Trust for education and so forth. And so we do know the people that are working in that field. Pakistan, India, that's his center. There might be other needs that are in Africa through Africa Federation that the Asari Family Foundation has made contributions. And then so if we were to know about Jawad Kaki's, you know, so the more we know collectively, the more likely it is that another person will not start something anew, but rather work with what is already available and channel funds.
So let me ask you this, all of you,
before you go there, see the issue, I think the core issue is this. See, the issue is one of transparency and accountability, right? I mean, the reason why people are doing things wrong, because the organizations that exist today do not have the transparency and the excellency and the accountability. We'll talk, we can disagree with me, but we can talk about this.
Okay, right? we'll bring the audience on. One last question before we bring in the audience. Quick question.
I did say it was going to be provocative.
One quick question to all of you. If you're working in this field, if you're investing in this field, what are you getting wrong? What would you change? What would you like to see done better? Where's the room for improvement?
Well, I think you started off with a very misleading invitation, saying a quick question, and my answer may not be quick. You only invited a quick question, not a quick response. I think what we're not doing right, and we're going to correct it, is what we are doing here in Davos. The fact that we're not taking the best practices, leveraging commonalities, and we will from here learn that mistake. That's one mistake I think we will walk away from Davos.
That was actually quite short.
My concern is that a lot of times we throw money at something to give us immediate satisfaction because we get sort of this feeling of, I did something.
Yeah.
And we don't follow it through. In the case of education, you know, the experience I have is that you have to put in the time to understand, especially the people, the fertile minds that we send there, we have to ensure that those that are teaching them are worthy of their minds.
I think I said it earlier in terms of, do you educate people to be good human beings or do you educate people to pass exams? And we've got close to 12,000 students in Pakistan and about 6,000 to 8,000 students in India. And that's the one that we are really struggling with, because you want them to pass the exam as well, but that is basically rote learning. So how do you inculcate that?
And do you have an answer? Or you're working on an answer?
I'm working on an answer. We haven't got an answer. But I think that we can sort of work towards at least up to grade 8 before the board exam comes in to educate people properly and then let them do the rote learning after that.
See, like as I mentioned earlier, that it is not humanly possible for us to actually ensure there's a brick and mortar school in every part of the world where there needs to be one, right? It's just not possible.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's no human capital to actually go fund to actually man those schools. So we got to look at the use of technology and how can we use technology to actually enhance the leadership capacity and also improve the quality of education of members, right? Availability of tablets and the academic content, and how can we engage the educational community, right? For example, here's a model. Saying, don't do textbooks anymore. Just distribute the curriculum textbooks on a tablet. So it's really embrace the current model and then extend it. Then see how the learning is happening. Use analytics to figure out what's missing. Challenge the educational community at large to provide more content, right? Building on the Khan Academy. So really, to bring in a new approach, whereby you're not really, there's no teacher supply to man the schools. In India, for example, when they took the Azim Premji Foundation, again, we don't do duplication, we work with things. They said, look, in India, in every school in the village, each school goes 5 days without their teacher because there's no toilet facilities, so women teachers don't go to school. Right? So how are you going to solve this problem? You can't really solve it. You got to use that new. Obviously, Modi building toilets is a good problem. Okay? But I think we got to look at technology and new methods of delivery.
Okay. That's right.
Go for it.
See, the other thing is that what we don't do is we don't do the due diligence when we put up a school or something like that. Somebody from India comes, a Maulana or anything, that we need a school over there. So we just fund it, they build a school.
There's no follow-up.
And there's no follow-up. So that is the main issue that has been. School is a place where it takes you about something like 18 years by the time somebody gets something on the table or goes to the institution. It's a long process. So either you have to work with the community, like, let me give you an example. Bhavnagar school, Bhavnagar community of Khojas came down about 10 years back, and they said that we want to open a school in Bhavnagar. So we said that, okay, but we will fund you only 50%, and you fund 50%. What was the reason behind that? That why did you ask them to fund 50%? We could have funded 100%. Because they would get 50% locally, then the community over there were involved. And that's how they were involved. And today, if you see the results, they are in Bhavnagar, one of the best schools. Similarly, in Maua, the school was handled by the Bombay people. And it took us 5 years to get it. And the same thing, the same school we renovated and then gave it to Bhavnagar people. And they are handling it very well, and it's coming up very well. So one way is to deal with the school, with the community, and let the community handle it, right? And the other way is that you participate totally, like in Lucknow school that we are participating at the moment, and we are successful in that.
Okay.
I don't know. Please repeat the question because I don't know.
The question was, what do you think needs to change? What are the things that you really, if you could fix something, you had a magic wand in this particular area of life, what would you want to change? What would you want to see done better?
Well, when you're looking at the primary level and middle school level, I really can't comment on that. But when I'm looking at the higher education, my son just graduated. I'm looking for him to get resources. So I guess because that's the place I am in my life, I'm looking for mentorship. I'm looking for ways for him to be guided to do the next best thing, okay? To be an entrepreneur, basically. So I may not, you get what I mean, right?
Okay, let's throw it open to the audience so we can make some extra points. Yes?
First and foremost, I would like to ask, especially Jawad Bhai, that the nursery Khoja's institutions, the World Federation, the Nasimco, and Africa Federation, are fully accountable. They are fully accountable, every and transparent. Their accounts have been submitted to each and every member of the Khoja Shia Nashari community. So I think he must withdraw that one. He must withdraw.
Okay.
Number two.
Would you like me to respond?
If you let him deal with that since there's a sensitive point.
Yeah.
Okay, number two.
Hold on, let him respond to that point.
You see, I think that I never said that Khoja institutions are not get good at bookkeeping, right? The definition of
the user transparency.
May I please finish and then you have a chance, right? I'm talking about transparency accountability. I'll give you an explanation and we can also agree to have a different perspective, right? But I said it's not going to be that smooth. So look at it. I'll give you an example. Let's look at the Zainabia child sponsorship scheme, right? It's been going on for 40, 50 years now, okay? What are the success points that we can talk about that, right? Accountability to mean say, okay, we have educated X thousand people. From the X thousand people, so many hundreds have graduated, and X of one or two of them have gone and set up a whole school, and now there's a whole community coming out. So I don't look at bookkeeping. I trust accountants and I trust bookkeepers to make sure all the cents and the balance sheets will be tied up. What I do about accountability is signing up for results and delivering on those results. Right? I say I'll educate 1,000 kids, and I did 1,200 kids, right? I only did 200. And even doing 200 may not be a bad result, but I'm accountable. And I can tell you why I didn't do it, because I forgot A, B, and C, and now we're going to fix this. So when I talk about accountability, it's not bookkeeping.
Again, I challenge you on the one other thing, which you said on Zainabia. Once again, I'll give to the person who is in charge, you will give an answer to you.
Absolutely.
I just want to clarify, I'm not in charge of Zainabia, but just speaking from an institutional perspective, let me tell you the concern I have here, having heard the panelists out there. There are more than 15 to 20 different trusts in this room, and you all run your own institutions, you are accountable to yourself. The only democratically elected representative institution of our community are the federations out there. Every decision is not only deliberated, there is a consensus process that the World Federation has constitutionally obliged with the 150,000 people.
So it doesn't tell you versus the whole audience.
Wait.
I will. 1 second. Let's Sajjad come back in. He made a very good point there about you guys are accountable to yourselves in a sense. There's an institution that's democratically accountable. What's your response to that?
No, what I was going to say about a project of the World Federation in our Kunda. I don't know how many of you all have been there. I have been there. I have seen it. It's they've said they've housed so many people. There's a one-room thing with no windows, no toilets, no running water, no electricity. What kind of housing is that? Huh? They may have housed so many people, but that's not really housing.
If I may add, and I'm the only representative here that is actually representing a federation. So I'm the Secretary General for the Nasimba Federation. And I think that we as a federation, and what Jawad Bhai is saying is that we are accountable. It's not up to us to think that we've given him enough information. We have to make sure that he understands what we're giving him. So what Sajjad Bhai, no please, let me finish just for a second. And other things. Sometimes just because you're a federation doesn't mean that you're doing the best practices. So what we have to do, and I think what the Davos purpose is to try to figure out who does the best things in education, who does the best things in infrastructure, and we use our federations to facilitate the funding and the resources of the worldwide community to channel it through this process in order to get the best and most effective results, which are measurable, quantifiable, and deliverable, so that we are...
Very briefly, and we'll take some other questions.
I'll give you an example of a Karachi situation. Okay, 1971, I moved to Karachi. Okay, our community, the Khoja community, was living in Musaland and other Khara that are all these places, right? Hats off to the Karachi Pirai Jamaat. Today, there's no child in the Khoja community in Karachi that cannot really go to school. Okay, people living in slums are no longer living in the slums, right? So basically, they've delivered results, right?
I would correct you. It's not the Khoja Pirai Jamaat, but private foundations that did that.
Okay, great. But the point is that is a success model. Okay, this is a success model whereby they've removed poverty, people are not living in slums, every child got access to education. This is the accountability I want, not bookkeeping, right? Bookkeeping is for bookkeepers. So I think we need to actually really upgrade our understanding of accountability.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. Zain over there, and then we'll go, gentlemen.
You know, we had hands first, but it's okay.
Okay, I'm trying to diversify some of the audience contributions. So it doesn't. We'll come back to you.
Mine would equally be diversified. We're not sharing the views here.
Okay.
We may be complimented.
Okay, don't worry, we'll come to you. We'll come to you.
Firstly, let me commend everybody in this room who's involved in education. I think it's essential for our community and the wider humanity. I think when we discuss education in all communities, not just the Khoja community, we miss a really important point, and I'm talking about Muslim communities. And that is, we don't seem to have a focus on influencing the curricula, the foundational curricula in the countries that we live in. And maybe I believe you visited the Islamic Museum of Australia when you were there. And there was a group of private people who actually put together a museum to show the contribution of Muslims to Australian society. And schools make tours and visits to this museum to learn about the impact that Muslims have had. And it has a very good counter influence on what's happening in the world right now. So kids, the foundational kids that you gentlemen and ladies are influencing or aiming to influence are taught at a very young age that Muslims around the world have a very important role to play and have had a very important role to play. So my question to the panel is, what can we as Khojas do, if anything, to influence the curricula of countries that we live in?
Phenomenal question. We can influence the direction of the curriculum. To do that in America, I speak for America, you have to be part of the parent-teacher associations, you have to be part of the city council, because that's where the curriculum is set. If we choose not to be a part of the civic society and just send our children to the school, we would not have a say.
And from your experience living in California, I think,
absolutely.
How proactive have Khoja communities been in getting elected to school boards and local councils and parent-teacher associations?
We have not been very good at it because we do not participate.
In LA?
In LA. For those who have participated, they have had a voice and they've been able to influence a curriculum to meet exactly your point. I just wanted to come back to this point about private and communal partnership. I think we shouldn't be getting into a conflict. We should work in concert with each other. The private foundations, they are passionate, they do great work. The communities do phenomenal work. We need to partner and learn from each other.
Briefly, just briefly, participation
is a very danger when you speak and generalize 300 million people through one locality you're familiar with, right? And there are many school districts. I've actually served in a school district. I was an advisor. I've actually technology things, so forth. Participated in council meetings.
So Khoja community in Seattle.
But I'm not a Khoja. I'm a humanitarian.
Okay,
right?
but in case you haven't noticed, there's a big Khoja behind your head. I'm going to pinpoint this and say, Khoja communities where you live, I'm sure you know what's going on. Are they politically involved? It's a simple question, yes or no?
Some are, some are not. You can't speak for everybody. Right?
Okay,
there's a Khoja. Look, here's a Khoja here.
No, but in your community in Seattle, hold on, you said LA. Let me just get an answer to my question.
Yeah.
I feel strongly about that. You're in Seattle.
Yeah,
You're in Seattle.
Yes.
I don't know how many thousands of Khojas live in Seattle. In your community, your friends, family, are they involved in? Are they involved in the school board?
Yes.
I'm not asking for a data.
Yes.
Just anecdotes.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Okay. Let's.
You don't even need to be involved in the school board. I remember when
Love
I was like 10 years old and I read something in the social studies book. I came home, I complained, my parents wrote a letter, and that was it.
Interesting.
They corrected.
Okay, let's go back to the audience. I'm going to come to you in a moment, but let's just take the very patient gentleman's waiting.
Thank you. First of all, I thank and commend the panel for their individual or whatever they're doing in terms of education, the private trust. 2 points, and third, I just want to touch on Europe. First and foremost, let me talk to you on Africa Federation. I'm involved in Federation, so I have an insight. We started off emphasizing on the need of education. I'm speaking from African perspective. As far as that debate is concerned, it's outdated for Africa. This panel has got huge talent, and we need them for implementation, and I'll come where we can use them. As far as the debate is concerned, Africa, 15 years ago, we had to go door to door and give the emphasis of education. That's long gone now. Everybody wants to be educated, right? It's how we fund them. And whenever I get an opportunity to speak here, I'll be talking about bottom line.
Okay.
Just to give you an insight, Africa Federation has got $5 million in circulation for post-A-level education. Every year, we spend $1 million for new applications. So education need is there, and all our Jaffrey academies, including Mombasa, which the president sitting next to me has excelled in results. As far as the gender sides goes, we have more female qualifying with high-flying A-levels at national standards. So coming back to quality, let me assure you, up to the A-levels, and now in some university, but the structure that we are working on after A-levels, we export, sorry?
No, I want to ask a question back to you on this note.
Yes.
Given there seems to be, and I'm a newcomer to all this, a little bit of tension between the communal and the foundation, and perhaps there should have been someone on the panel from that perspective. Let me ask you, as someone who's involved in African Federation, if you were on this panel and you were part of that earlier discussion, the question I asked them, let me ask you, do you think there should be more coordination and people should be doing things more together rather than separately? Is that your view?
It will never happen as far as private trusts are concerned, and I don't think we have the right to do that. What I feel, and here it's a Khoja forum, so I'm looking at everything from a Khoja perspective. So yes, we can be a supportive role to federations. As far as, let me just finish and then, as far as quality goes, Africa is exporting the best of quality in education. We don't have a quality. You can see Mujtaba Bhai seated there, Graham Thornton, Azim Bhai, our barrister, Shabir Lakha and all that. So the quality is second to none. And we are exporting human resource. You take 10 more communities. Again, it's communal, it's Khoja here. You look at all these communities, this is the talent originating from Africa. What we need, the bottom line here, is resources. We have the gurus here of the corporate world of the Khojas. I don't want to know about Bill Gates and that. My inspiration comes from the Shalinas, from Mahmoud Bhai here. These are the ones who should inspire, and these are the ones who owe us money to input, to facilitate and strengthen. What we need, bottom line, monies.
Okay, let me ask, does any other panelists want to deal with that one?
I would say,
if I may.
Go on.
I think, Shabir Bhai, you said it perfectly, excellent. The Africa Federation is the federation to look up to for all the other federations, because you have the experience, the know-how, and the time that you vested into this. The students that come out of Africa
But we need your resources. I want this.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what
But do you agree that the bottom line is ultimately...
Absolutely.
If we were to provide them with additional resources, if we were to focus like a spear on Africa and help them with educating more and more students, we would eradicate poverty within one generation.
My respective ordinances and the panel. Let me also give you one other thing.
Okay, I want to take some other points.
Sorry, there's no student in Africa.
We're running out of time.
Sorry, just let me finish.
No, but then you're blocking 3 or 4 other people who want to speak.
No child in Africa goes without education. Pre-A-levels and post-A-levels.
Okay.
You see, I think there's
very briefly, one sentence.
Briefly. See, I think there's a difference in perspective here. Okay, first of all, I personally work with the African Federation in your education, as you know. I think the issue is not this. See, when I look at, for example, a country like Tanzania, I don't look at the 10 or 20,000 Khojas. I look at 45 million people. Right? So my perspective is 45 million people in Tanzania.
Okay, guys, you can continue afterwards. I mean, there's no point this turns into a one-on-one conversation. There's other people. Gentleman here's on the microphone, then the gentleman to the right. Oh, and then Mojo.
Thank you. I want to make...
And then we're done. These 3 are the last questions.
I want to make 2 separate points. First, on the question that you asked, I live in the United States. I live in Long Island. As far as being politically active, I have a sort of an example of something recently that my wife and a couple of other mothers, this is not a Khoja initiative, but within the last 3 months, our school district instituted the 2 Eid holidays as public holidays at school. There was a very vigorous campaign. I had very little to do with it. It was all the mothers in the school district who teamed up with Hindu and Chinese mothers so that we have Chinese New Year, Diwali, and 2 Muslim holidays.
Awesome.
So there's a lot of grassroots activity.
Okay. And you had a second point, you said?
What's that?
You said you wanted to make a second point also.
My second point with respect to this debate between private foundations and the federations, as somebody who doesn't have an active foundation but donates to a bunch of different causes, is that this conference here today, I'm delighted to see that there's actually a marketplace where, in effect, there's a form of a marketplace amongst private foundations and federations. And I think our federations should take that as a challenge to improve themselves both from a substance and form perspective.
Okay, question here?
It's not a question, it's
Okay.
several comments actually.
Comment, criticism, attack, whatever you want.
No, so in terms of, I think the community has grown up enough that we don't need to only focus on primary education. And if you're sharing information, I'll share what the Repeat Foundation has done. So we have a full-fledged university now, and I think that's essential to be able to change curriculums. And changing curriculums and impacting thought is not only important in the West, it's as important, if not equally important in the East, because there's so much polarization between the sects, right? So, so there has been investment in post-secondary education, so that is, and it's a world-class university. We've also, we've got chairs at UC Berkeley and at Cambridge University. So that's happening. And I just wanted to make a comment on Sajad Bhai's point, where I don't think it's a choice between educating the person and helping them pass exams. I think if you educate the person and you inculcate good values, they will pass the exams in any case.
Okay. Do you want to briefly respond to that?
Yes. No, I would disagree with that, because then the emphasis, like we've worked with it for many years. You provide them with a good education, but they still have to do rote learning to get good grades in their exams so they can get into good universities. They will all pass the exams, but they will not necessarily get into good universities. Another thing that I do want to talk about a little bit is if you look at India, Pakistan, and the federation, the India, Pakistan and the Africa Federation, there's a big difference there. In India and Pakistan, most of the charitable work is being done by private foundations, and in Africa, it is being done by the Federation. And that has been the case since the 40s. And so I think that's because most people here are from East Africa. They feel that should be the case all over, but that's not how it has evolved over the years.
And you think the way it is fine? There's no need for change?
No, I mean, this is how it's evolved. It's working.
Okay.
It's working for them, it's working for us.
Fine. Yes, last question.
So this distinguished panel didn't give much importance to providing secondary or post-secondary education in the West. And I'd beg to differ with that, even though there are lots of opportunities for post-secondary education in the West, and our own community, the Khoja community, has been well represented on the business side and perhaps the professional side. I believe we still need to channel specific resources towards certain areas like the media, perhaps politics, where we're very much underrepresented. I'd like to see more scholarships set up to specifically promote and encourage some of our youth into these specific areas. What are your thoughts on that?
Very good final question. Say a completely unbiased.
Let me answer that with one example.
More media scholarships.
I want to answer that with one sterling, shining example. Mohammed Lilla is here. Mohammed, are you here? Okay, he's coming tomorrow. He is a student that 2 decades ago, the World Federation sponsored to go to Columbia Journalism School, one of the premier journalism school in this country. A month ago, when we were facing the crisis with the media in Simcoe, and Mehdi was one of the advisors to us, thank you for that. We contacted Mohammed and he gave us sage advice. He said, this is what CNN would do. We relied on the advice to make critical decisions. So we have invested, we have the seeds, we can do more.
And if I may add, Shafiq, as the representative of Nasimco, I take you up on your offer, and I'm setting up a foundation for specifically that scholarship, supported by the Punjani Family Foundation, inshallah.
If I may say, in June or July,
I've only been there in office for 2 days.
June or July of 2000, when I actually had a chance to go to Tanzania, the culture that was in Tanzania at that time was a container culture, if you know what I'm saying, right? It was at that point, working with the Africa Federation, I said, look, let's actually set up scholarships. And they said, look, do educational loans. And we continue to support that, right? Now, if there are more ideas, there's never been a shortage of funds to be provided to Africa Federation. In fact, I will tell you, I have a meeting on Tuesday morning with the head of the Education Board of Africa in Dar es Salaam at 11 in the morning to discuss this. Now, the issue is, I think with regards to North America, I think there's a lot of opportunities for our community, right? I think what we need is more mentoring, right? More helping, how to get the aids. There's a whole schemes of financial aid programs to encourage people media. There's many other organizations, Islamic organizations working in America, Shia Islamic organizations, who will also give people things. At the Iman organization at Seattle, we have a scholarship schemes. Anybody want to go further education, there's a $5,000 scholarship. They can apply and get it, right? So there's a lot of opportunities. So it's not really, it's really mentoring, networking. I think the issue that we're talking about here is vocational training, right? In other parts of the world is valid, and I think there's work to be done here that needs to be developed further.
So if I can just expand on that, I agree there is some examples, but I think those are unique examples. Our culture, we were very entrepreneurial. We're drawn towards business and the professions where our children will be earning a good level of salaries or will be making good money. What we need to do, if you look at other successful communities, they've gone beyond that to be able to influence at the political level, to be able to work through the media. If you look at the Jewish community as obviously a stellar example of this is where we need to aspire to in the next generation. So we need to start investing in bringing more Mehdi Hassans into our own culture and get politicians so that we can start influencing politics at large.
Anyone want to make a final point in response to that?
I kind of feel that I see what you're talking about, and I find that, I guess because that's what I'm exposed to. The young generation, the millennials, I find they don't have these resources. Yes, the education and the funding that you guys are doing in other parts of the world are important, but the investment that you can make towards our community is going to make an immediate impact. And that's what I find I'm able to do, because the immediate effect is that I'm open now to a network of 7,000 to 10,000 people who realize that, guess what? This Muslim woman is not oppressed. And this Muslim woman is not and is educated and is making something else other than the B word. So basically, I think it's important for us to balance it out. Spend some time here, and of course, I find that by giving empowering the youth here, you will get future philanthropists as well.
There's one last question. You want to take it? Last one, briefly, Anton.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I will go to the point of private educational institutions run privately by philanthropists and the community-based institutions run by the federations. I am one of the persons who has a private institution called Ahlul Bayt Islamic Center in Kigoma in Tanzania. Jawad Bhai, some of the people here have visited and have seen how it is running, from a nursery school to a primary school and a secondary school, and then we have the religious classes at the pre-Hausa and Hausa levels. And then, fortunately, I'm also the chairman of Central Bilal Modern Africa Federation, and we run the Bilal Muslim missions, and we have schools of the community at primary school level and at nursery school level, and we have community-based schools like the Al-Muntazir schools in Dar es Salaam, the Jafri schools in Kenya, which are very successful. Different continents have different challenges. Like if you see in India, you can run private institutions if you have got proper manpower, because you can get proper educated manpower there. For us in Africa, it is very difficult to get that. That's why it is good, myself, as running a private institution, I feel the community-based institution have a longer life and more sustainability rather than private institutions. Okay. Most of you are very good donors. You give your money. When you give your money, you don't have time to go and check what's happening there. 90% of the Khojas here in this Khoja community are very, very generous. They give millions of dollars. But do you guys follow and go and see in the field what is happening with your money? That's where Africa Federation comes in, where we go to grassroots levels to check, and this is audited by the boards of those schools and also the Supreme Council alone.
The gentleman made a quite lengthy point, and to my right, Sajjad Ibrahim whispered not true, so I'd like to hear him expand on that. I think it'd be quite interesting.
Thank you. We monitor our schools. We go there every year.
Where the time? The time is there now.
Look at them. And we do and there is constant monitoring of the schools that we run. So that is not correct.
No, I would have tried to say this is a Khoja function. The main reason of this summit is to unite Khojas for Khojas. All right. Now, here comes Khojas who says that no, I'm here for 45 million people or to 100 million people. Hello, this is for Khojas. Number one. Number two. And then insulting the same institutions which are the fundamentals of this community. This is not acceptable.
Muhammad Jafar's point, I'm guessing from having followed this discussion from the moderator position, was aimed at the gentleman to my right and left. So if they want to make 30-second responses to each, and then my suggestion would be you all continue it right there while they sound call for dinner, because there's a long conversation and it requires to go. So listen, why don't you give us your briefest answer, and then all three of you at the same dinner table. Carry on.
Let's give 30 seconds to each of us.
That's what I just said. Yeah, 30 seconds each.
I think there's a big misunderstanding or lack of understanding about the focus that we have. Okay, first of all, supporting the Khojas, as we notice it in the education levels, is our priority to remove poverty. Khoja priority. But the point is that our opportunity to make a contribution to the human society is bigger than just that. It's bigger than that. And when we look at, for example, in my case, please my case. Somebody who was born in Tanzania as a Khoja, proud of his Khoja heritage. I also actually have attachment to the people who raised us, who cleaned our shoes, who washed our laundry, who taught us in schools. I'm as much of a product of the broader human society as I'm a product of the Khoja community. And I believe that I need to give back. It's not insulting anybody or undermining anybody. And we actually participate in support with the Khoja institutions. But I think our opportunity as Khojas is to think humanity. Right?
Yes,
all
we
of
are
us.
also united.
But it doesn't mean that we have to kind of find a disagreement when there isn't any disagreement. This is what I'm seeing. How this correct? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can you go on and now finish?
No, in terms of the through Sajadia Trust, we've been helping the World Federation in terms of monitoring its projects, and they've come back to us and said that they may want us to even monitor their project, because we go there and we're on the ground on a yearly basis. Right? And we have a lot of projects and we keep on doing that, and we work with the same agents. Right? So it's not that we're not working with the World Federation, but we have a different model and we think our model works for us.
Thank you. Okay, let's finish the discussion. Thank you very much.